Hello everybody. It can often feel like since the turn of the millennium, the French have really given up much of their interest in making exciting, interesting and unusual cars, the things for which they were best known and loved. But in a lot of ways, that has meant that when they do try their hand at something a little bit different, it makes it all the more special. Most recently, Renault had a rather unexpected success with their revival of the Alpine brand. And I think it's fair to say that very, very few of us actually thought they were ever going to make a car like the A110, and even fewer thought they were going to make it and have it be as brilliant as it was. A decade before, though, it was Peugeot who decided to be a little bit daring and delve back into the world of the sporty coupe, with this, the RCZ. And today I am driving the hottest version of all, the very rare and rather pokey RCZ-R. And according to some, this is a guaranteed future classic, but to others, it's a laughable attempt at a sports car from a company that had long ago forgotten how to build them. Which is it? Well, let's find out. The original RCZ landed back in 2009, though the timing may have been somewhat unfortunate. With the world still reeling from the effects of the global financial crisis, the car still made something of an impact. Not only was it a rather striking and nice looking thing for a Peugeot, it was a rather striking and nice looking thing full stop. As this car was spun off the same platform that gave us the 308, from the side it does look a little odd with it being very cab forward. However, you cannot deny the fact they put some serious effort into this. The car's visual calling card has always been this distinctive and very pronounced double bubble roof, which I think really does look the part, although a lot of people seem to think it's removable. It's not. I'd have loved to have seen them build a sort of Targa top or full convertible version, but I suppose they felt with all the convertibles they already had in the lineup, it would have been unnecessary. I beg to differ. To begin with, the engine lineup consisted of a couple of versions of the 1.6 litre Prince, a turbocharged four-cylinder, one making about 156 horsepower and the other making around 200. There was also a 2-litre turbo diesel. Then, in 2013, we got this, the RCZ-R, which still had the 1.6 litre turbo engine, but now with a spare turbo and a new headline-grabbing power figure of 270 horses. To put that into some context, it was the most powerful 1.6 litre engine in production at the time, full stop. Power still goes exclusively to the front wheels, which I know will put some people off, but that didn't exactly stop VW from shifting a boatload of Siroccos. However, you do have a very nice short-throw 6-speed manual gearbox, which is on the light side but still very pleasant to use. And, in the name of traction, you've also got a Torsen limited slip differential as standard. There is also the complete suite of hot version refinements, so the car sits a little lower and on firmer suspension. The car has received minor visual tweaks throughout, including a pronounced spoiler at the rear, and I've got to say, it does look really rather good, particularly in this shade, which is known as Moroccan Red. You also have these ludicrously sculpted chairs, which I've got to say are magnificent, and also, unlike the ones in the standard car, are not electric in any way, shape or form, I think, and do contribute to this car's weight saving. This is actually 30 kilos lighter than the THP 200. In the real world, it weighs just 1,330 kilos. That is not bad. To put that into some context for you, that's 50 kilos lighter than a Ferrari 360 Challenge Stradale. The 0 to 62 times was just under 6 seconds, and the top speed here was limited to 155 miles an hour. They weren't exactly cheap though, with these cars in the UK retailing for just under £32,000. To help justify that though, they were at least rare, with just over 3,000 being made globally, of which about 10% made it to the UK. Today's example is almost entirely standard, with the sole modification that I've seen being the fitment of a couple of RCZ-R little door striker covers down here. Barring that though, it is exactly as it left the factory almost a decade ago. It's been brought to me by a lovely chap called Andy, who's lusted after one of these for quite some time. He bought it initially to replace his daily driver, a Vauxhall Astra GTC. But not long after he got it, he then acquired a Honda Accord Type S, which he'd also fancied for quite a bit. He bought that car with the intention of flipping it, but then when he'd sold it, he found that actually he quite liked having two cars, and in that time these had also risen in value significantly. So, figuring this was a little bit of an investment and something to be worth squirreling away, he decided to buy a Duke Nismo RS as his new daily driver, leaving this as his special occasions car. But is it really good enough to be a weekend-only car? It's a Peugeot after all. Let's find out. I've got to say, this isn't at all what I expected. I have driven a regular RCZ quite some time ago, but it was long enough that I've largely forgotten exactly how it felt, and this is a very different car. And before I get on to how the car drives, the first thing that I really want to mention is just how special a place this does still feel. Peugeot are an absolutely baffling company, because most of the time I see one of their cars, maybe it's because they are the base level ones, they just don't look like they've put any effort at all into them. And then you get something like this, which is really quite spectacular. You've got nice leather here, contrast stitch, even the dash has dials that look a little bit unusual. You've got a sat-nav up here, which is, yes, very out of date, but does fold away so you don't have to be bothered by it. And even the switchgear down here, which, okay, is dated a little bit, still looks nice. There's plenty of chrome embellishments. The gear lever is a slightly odd shape and does feel a little bit weird in the hand, and the handbrake looks like it's a temp pole that's been broken in two, but other than that, it is a decent place to spend some time. You can certainly sense that the suspension has been tuned to be deliberately more aggressive. Even at higher speeds, I'm doing 50 miles an hour now, it's still a little bit jittery. It doesn't cope with the potholes, lumps and bumps and ridges in the road all that well. Even here, on one of my more demanding sections of road, once you've got up a little bit of speed, most cars do tend to even out a little bit. Their suspensions begin to work. This retains an element of jitter the whole time. It never quite settles, though it is still, for the most part, pretty decent, and it hasn't crashed over anything. So I'll give it that. But by far the biggest surprise is the way that this car copes with the power. 270 horses and 230 odd pound-foot of torque, 330 newton meters is a lot to put through the front wheels. But let me show you. I'm in first now, and I never do this, but no drama, no traction light, tiny little bit of torque steer at the end of second there, that's it. But the car rips through to its, okay, not particularly high, 6,000 RPM red line, with really not much at all in the way of fuss. Then, when you get to a bend and you might expect the car to start struggling, it just doesn't. Right now on loan, I'm driving a far more youthful 2023 Mini Cooper S that has just 178 horsepower, and that feels like it's had a far harder time of dealing with the power that it's got. The wheels are constantly chirping away, even when it's bone dry. I do have to say though, it doesn't feel as quick as I thought it was going to. 270 horsepower and something weighing just over 1,300 kilos is quite a bit. And though it's not exactly slow, neither does it sort of really push me back in the seat and make me go, whew, crikey, even in, say, second gear. It sounds more frantic and manic than it really is. And in spite of that sequential turbo setup, there's still a lot of lag here. It's not a particularly responsive engine low down. Let me show you. I'm doing 2,500 RPM now in fourth gear, and I'll just put my foot down now. Nothing, nothing, nothing. There's the power. That's not great. Now, as you do pile on the RPMs, no, actually it doesn't get better. That's frustrating. There is a good chance that that is one of the things helping the car maintain its traction. The Mini seems to respond far more keenly than this, but still, I am a little bit underwhelmed with it. The brakes, though, I've no complaints about, and that might be because the R got a set of 380mm two-piece Alcons. and they look rather spectacular. In fact, I'm not quite sure I've ever seen a disc on a road car that looks exactly like this. Even got Peugeot Sport engraved into the housing. They're quite cool. Sadly though, they are rather expensive, and I'm told a common criticism of the RCZ-R. You see, if you go to a Peugeot dealer, and that technically speaking is the only place you can get the new discs from, they may want up to £2,500 for a new pair. Even if you're lucky, you play the game and you know where to buy them for a little bit less, getting the genuine discs is going to set you back about 1,500 quid by the time you've had them fitted, and once you've factored in the pads, you're looking at a bill of close to £2,000. And that's not very Peugeot-y, is it? The other common gripe that I'm told RCZ-R owners have is the fact that the turbos have an unusual coating on them, and it likes to break up and flake off, coating your engine bay in a sort of weird pink dust. And despite the fact that this, like every other RCZ, was not even built by Peugeot, in fact being constructed by Magna Steyr over in Graz, Austria, the same factory that builds the Mercedes G-Wagon and many other cars, it still has its fair share of disappointingly Peugeot problems. Mini fans will not be surprised to hear that this engine is not the most reliable, because it was actually a collaboration between PSA, Peugeot Citroën, and BMW, who used it in the second generation Mini, where it developed a reputation for being one of the most unreliable engines out there, in some cases necessitating full rebuild or replacement at just 20 or 30,000 miles. Now, BMW actually stopped using this engine quite some time ago, I believe in around 2009, but Peugeot, I'm told, are still using it to this very day. However, they haven't left it alone, and work has been done to address some of the key criticisms. In 2013, I'm told, quite a bit of effort was made into trying to make it a far more durable unit, and so every RCZ-R out there will have benefited from those tweaks. Unfortunately, one thing they didn't improve was the tensioners, which for both the timing chain and auxiliary belt are a well-known point of failure. Most frustratingly, when Andy got this car, it being somewhat overdue in his maintenance, he took it to the Peugeot dealer, who then fitted a new water pump and auxiliary belt, but failed to notice that the tensioner was essentially knackered. And so just 200 miles later, the aux belt slipped off, which was not good. Fortunately, nothing happened to the car. He noticed the problem fairly early on and was able to safely stop before anything catastrophic happened. But still, that's unfortunate. And it's that sort of stuff which has kept people away from these cars by and large. And it's such a shame because there's so much about it, which is absolutely right. It's still, I think, a pretty darn good looking car. Not the most beautiful I've ever seen, but I'm pretty sure if you own one of these, it'd never fail to strike up a conversation. And then you have this gorgeous interior, which with its leather and chrome really does lift it a couple of steps above your average French fare. But you've got all those little things, like the fact that the little triangle here is basically trying to break free. Some of the stitching is beginning to fray, and the aforementioned reliability issues, which though they don't affect all RCZs, have essentially doomed all RCZs, because people now know they're problematic, and people aren't really going to be bothered to do their research and go, oh well, okay, these ones might be a little bit better, so I'll take a risk. As a result, prices for your regular early RCZs have fallen to the point where you can pick up a car for about £2,500 to £3,000. And there is also more good news. Not only are these certainly the fastest of all RCZs, they may be the most reliable, perhaps second only to the diesels, but they're also one of the cheapest to run. These actually have lower CO2 figures than the 200 horsepower version, meaning the tax is not that unreasonable. Last year, Andy paid £200. It also, on a run, will do 50 mpg, and even in mixed usage, about 42. Plus, as a rare and unusual car, in comparison to just about any hot hatchback, insurance can be quite reasonable as well, though your mileage may vary. I am also told there is an enthusiastic and dedicated bunch of both RCZ and RCZ-R owners out there willing to help anybody new to either the mark or the model in terms of getting stuff sorted, where to buy parts from at a better price, etc, etc. And that's good to know. when Andy and I were discussing this car and the alternatives you could have for the same money, the one that kept coming up was the 370Z. At this point in time, you're really going to struggle to get a decent Cayman for sort of 14, 15 grand, and though they are out there, it won't be the more powerful Cayman S or anything else. However, you will get a 370Z and certainly a 350Z with change. And those are a very different take on the sports car formula, a far more traditional approach with nice big, meaty, naturally aspirated engine up the front and drive being sent to the rear. In the real world, I expect this is at least as fast as a 370, if not a bit quicker. However, the Nissan will sound better. To my eyes, I think perhaps look a little bit better too. These are pretty but awkward. Those are maybe handsome but a little bit more classically proportioned. And though this does have the back seats which the Nissan lacks, they are a very limited use. Consider them for children only, or particularly small adults. But the boot is massive. It's very practical, this car. As and when required for big and bulky items, you can even fold the back seats too, giving you quite an impressive amount of load space. And though on a wet track day I would wager this is going to be the far faster car, in the real world, as a driving tool, in terms of interaction, feel and excitement, I've got to say I think the Nissan has it. Though again, this is actually the far nicer place to spend your time, and it's also going to be quite a bit cheaper to run, certainly in terms of, say, your fuel costs. This then is a car that really hasn't gotten under my skin, but I can see why it would for somebody else. It's a nice enough car, it goes reasonably well, and it's certainly rare and unusual. But it just doesn't have the right type or amount of drama that I'd like in a sports car. However, back to the original and very big question, will this be a future classic? I don't know, but at the kind of prices being asked, £13,000 to £15,000, I think it's certainly a car worth considering if you don't mind the front-wheel drive bit. And daft costs for the odd part aside, the overall low running costs also mean that if you do want to use this as a daily driver, which for me I think is how it would be best, I think it's still an interesting car, just not one that I lust after. Sorry, Peugeot, but I appreciate the fact you tried. Anyone looking for that second coming of the French sports car, just save up for the Alpine. It'll cost a lot extra, but trust me, it is worth it. Anyway, that's enough from me. I want to say a big thank you to Andy for bringing his car out, and as ever, to you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.